Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast for the Love of Books. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. Today on the podcast, I talked to Jake Thurston. Jake is a pastor in South Dakota, and he wrote a book called You Need Friends. I loved this book. I think what he talks about is so important. Why we should not be trying to do life alone. We need people. We don't need thousands of people, but we need people in our lives that we can talk to and confide in and who can, point out if maybe we're heading in the wrong direction. I think it's important. I think we are not created to do life alone. And I loved his book. I thought it was fabulous. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation, and I encourage you to get his book. I think it's for anybody. Even if you have close people in your life, it was a lot of great reminders of why it's important. So thanks for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you. I love to read, but the topic of your book is something that has come up a lot in conversations. So our church this summer is really focusing on making connections with people, getting people connected, and the subject of friendship. And this is something that we have talked about a lot. I even had lunch with a friend today, and we had the same discussion talking about this. So your book is called You Need Friends. You didn't just decide to write a book about friends. Like, you've been studying this for a long time. Why is this a topic that you wanted to study and really delve into?
Yeah, like every once in a while, you have this crazy chance where you just stumble upon a topic that resonates with every fiber of your bones. Not everyone has that moment where they say, like, wow, I cannot shake this thought, this idea, this problem that needs to be solved. Uh, and for whatever reason, the Lord either blessed me or cursed me with that. Uh, you know, so the whole story really begins back as far back to high school, really. When I attended youth group, I've always been someone who loves friends. I love community, and I've always had kind of like a radar for the person who exists on the outs, who
Mhm.
just need to be included in and brought into the greater group. So I'm just always aware of that person. Um,
Right.
so when I was studying for my master's program in 2015, I stumbled upon a stat that said America was amongst the loneliest nations in the world. We are enduring a loneliness epidemic. This was in 2015,
Yeah.
5 years before COVID, right?
Right.
So that just boggled my mind. How could that even be the case? Then, in the same breath, I stumbled upon a topic called spiritual friendship that same semester, which was this long running Christian practice and church history and Christian tradition that just articulates what a friendship with other believers founded upon the mutual love of Jesus can do for you and your soul. It was just the most beautiful articulation of friendship I've ever heard. So I had this great idea for a thesis for
Yeah.
my master's program. It's how could the local church remedy loneliness through the rediscovery of spiritual friendship? A
Yeah.
great thesis it was, but it didn't stop there. In 2017, I had to keep searching for this. I was like, I think there's some more here. So I went on to, write sermons about it, blog posts about it. I did some keynotes about it. Went on to get my doctorate in ministry over this, and most recently publishing this book with just this hope of trying to unleash a renaissance of friendship here, where we, in our loneliest age that we've ever had as a nation, as a world, we can sit back and realize, wow, maybe the relationship we never think twice about is actually the most important thing we could be prioritizing right now outside of our family. Uh,
Right.
So that's kind of the 20,000 foot view of the story.
Yeah. What is something that has surprised you in your studying of this? What is something that a fact or something that has just shocked you as you've learned about all this?
Probably the most startling of the problem. I'll answer it in two phases. One, the most startling part of the problem is how much our young people are suffering from loneliness.
Hmm.
It's very different. I mean, elderly people also have high rates of loneliness, but for very different reasons from our young people.
Right.
You think our young whippersnappers are just super well connected, right? Um, well, that's the irony. They're more connected than ever before, but they're more lonely than ever before either
Yeah.
for this population. You go back to, like, when we were kids and when our parents were kids, what did they do after school? They went over to each other's homes. They hung out at
Right.
parks. You didn't know where your kids were, and it was okay because they were hanging out with each other. Whereas here, we just retreat back home and we hop on our devices, and now we're
Mhm.
connecting in isolation. We're doing community alone. It's very
Right.
weird. And that 100% impacts how we do relationships, and is particularly apparent amongst our young people. So that's really startling. But then in my research, especially coming out of the intervention I did for my dissertation, Really, at the end of the day, if you want to grow closer to your friends and you want more lasting relationships, um, it ultimately comes down to how much of yourself you're willing to share,
Yep.
right? Like what we're seeing in the loneliness epidemic right now isn't just that there's a onslaught of people who have no friends whatsoever. It's an
Yeah.
onslaught of people who don't have deep friends who truly know them, right?
Hmm.
We're content with the surface, but actually what we really are longing for are for people to understand every parts of us. And what that requires is getting into the nitty-gritty details of your
Yeah.
life that no one ever wants to talk about. And as scary as it is, that's actually the pathway to really feeling loved and cherished in deep ways. So
Yeah.
really trying to call that to attention.
What would you say to somebody that says, I don't need friends. I'm good. I'm I'm fine the way I am. I don't need
Mhm.
anybody. I'm good.
You're kidding yourself. Is what I'm saying. Now,
Yeah.
like truly, because the whole title of my book is "You Need Friends." Um,
Right.
Granted, there is a subjective nature to our relational connection. In fact, loneliness is a subjective feeling because loneliness is the discrepancy between your ideal relationship situation and
Mhm.
your actual relationship situation. So if you
Right.
feel like, yeah, you have decent enough connections, and you don't need a lot and you feel good, sweet, awesome. That's great. But if you are just really content with going about your life on your own, you're just going about it. I'm like, maybe you think you're fine, but could it be way better?
Right.
Right? Are you settling for a lesser form of your life that honestly, if you go so long as so many people in our country right now are doing, without consistent quality connection with quality friendships, you
Yeah.
don't know any different, right? Kind
Right.
of like if you grow with if you somehow got in an accident and your arm just naturally healed at an angle, that's normal to you, but you don't realize it's not normal till you get out and you see how other people are using their arms, right?
Right.
So perhaps you don't know how much better your life could be if you can surround yourself with more friendships.
Absolutely. And it is about getting in the nitty gritty. It's, the closest relationships I have. And this is something that we talked about last week in our life group. You don't have to have 500 good friends. You don't need, nobody can handle that. That's too much to handle, but you can have three, you can have four, you can have, a handful of people that you're close to. But the closest relationships I have are those that know my story and they know my junk and they know I trust them and they can trust me to do the same. And I feel bad for people that don't have that because it is so important. Life is hard and it's not fun sometimes. So we need people in our lives. We just do.
Mhm.
One of the things that you talked about in your book was the friend zone matrix.
Yeah.
Tell
Uh-huh.
me about that.
The friend zone matrix. Well, it all started when I was friend zoned by a girl. So truthfully, so it was in 2017. This is right after I finished my master's. So I was already doing, my studying on spiritual friendship and the loneliness epidemic and the science of connection and all that. And there was this girl at the church I was going to who was in our small group that I was like, I want to go on dates with this girl and try, so we did the casual dating or whatever. And so finally I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said the devastating words to any guy,
Right.
Jake, you're cool. I like you a lot, but I think we just need to be friends, right? Devastated, devastated. I was so upset. I mean, I wasn't that upset, but in my bemoaning, in my reflection, I thought about this just as this question of like, why is the friend zone considered a bad thing? What if the friend zone is a good thing? What if there are technically multiple friend zones we can be in with people?
Right.
And so then I thought of like this tool that combines some of the different spiritual qualities of friendship.
Mhm.
That the ancient monk, he's from the 12th century, his name's Saint Alred, who wrote on this topic of spiritual friendship, what it means to be friends with God and with others. So we look at that on the matrix, so that's the y-axis, the spiritual quality of your friendships. But then along the x-axis is the varying depth of your friendships, right?
Right.
So if I could somehow kind of paint this image, let's go along the x-axis. Obviously, you're not friends with everybody. And you're not friends at the same depth as everybody.
Right.
So you have the public space. Those are like your coffee shops. Those are your, that's church. Those are the people, those are the places you go to where you're surrounded by people you don't necessarily know, but they're all there for a common purpose. The social space, you're sharing snapshots of yourself. Kind of surface level conversation. They might know about you, but they don't really know you. right?
Right.
We all have the people in the social zone or the social space. The personal space, these are your good friends, right? Like, these are the people you're inviting to come over for barbecues, to help you move. If you're in a pinch financially or something, like, they'll support you. And then the intimate space is the 1 to 3 people who know your junk, as you said,
Right.
right? You're
Yeah.
typically your spouse, a best friend, you name it.
Yeah.
And the reason why that matters is because the closer people are to you, the more likely they're going to form you.
Yeah.
They're going to influence what you think, what you value, how you live. The closest people are the ones who are forming you, right? That's important because then along the y-axis, you have these 3 spiritual qualities of friendships that Alred categorizes. The first is carnal friends. Basically, these are friendships founded upon sin. Like, you're chasing wrong things, you're getting into bad habits, and these are kind of fun at first. He's like, oh, we're doing all these bad things, but the reason why you still like those friends is because they cause you to belong. It feels
Right.
good, but they are not good for you by any means.
Yeah.
Next is the worldly friendships. These are just, you like hanging out. They're pleasureful, pleasurable. I don't think pleasureful is a word, but they're pleasurable. But they're not really like doing anything for you either. They're kind of middle of the road friendships. That's what a lot of today's friendships are in culture,
Yeah.
right? Very surface level. They'll leave
Right.
when things get tough. Then ultimately, spiritual friendship is the highest good you can experience in a friendship. They're founded on the mutual love of Jesus. They're going to form you to be a better person. So then you can almost like use this X and Y axis to plot your friendships on it to see, one,
Hmm.
how many close friends do you have? But then two, you can actually look at it and see what's the spiritual quality of that friendship and how is it forming me? Are they
Yeah.
drawing me more towards Jesus or away from Jesus?
Yeah.
If you have a lot of friends in your bottom right quadrant, you're probably going to be a pretty carnal person. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
much you go to church or how many spiritual disciplines you do. If you're
Yeah.
surrounded by these bad people, that will almost always push against the good habits you're wanting to do
Sure.
versus you have your top right people in that intimate, personal, spiritual zone, um, then you're going to be formed to be like those people. So the whole idea is
Yeah.
it's not that you shouldn't be friends who are in, you shouldn't be friends with people who are in that carnal space. You
Right.
just need to have a core who are leading you towards the same principles, the same values of your life, because ultimately, and I'll close with this. This is already a long segment. Um, if you want to become a certain person, then you need to surround yourself with those kind of people,
Right.
essentially, right? And that's ultimately the big claim. You are who you're with. If you want to
Yeah.
become someone, a certain person, surround yourself with the people who are already that, and you
Right.
way more likely get there. So that's just a
Yeah.
helpful matrix to graph that
It's
out.
awesome. It's all true. All of that is very accurate. Don't you think that it's more difficult for guys to pursue this or want this more than women?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've gone on a couple of like podcasts for men that are talking about this thing too, and they say like, why is this so hard for us? Like, why do
Yeah.
men do that? And that's in part because of like some biological factors, like
Mm.
uh, men were always the ones, in the hunting gathering, side, like they're going out, right? They're living a little bit more in isolation. They're gonna go get the
Right.
stuff to gather, and whereas the women are back home socially, and they're just naturally more relational with each other.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So, but even though men don't maybe relate as much, they just relate differently. And
Right.
so they much more work side by side with friends, whereas women are more face to face. Like, they want to sit across from a coffee table and
Yeah.
just talk about life, right? Whereas guys are going to get more intimate in like the various parts of their life when they're working side by side on a project, or they're playing, they're playing pickleball, or they're going on a run, or something like that, It's
Right.
just mediated differently. But I also think there's some deep wounds and traumas of men being raised to not be weak, right?
Yeah.
Don't cry, you don't need anyone, suck it up, come on. So we also kind of give ourselves this mirage of saying, I'm this big honcho guy who doesn't need anybody else because I just need to fend
Right.
for myself because that's what's celebrated in culture. When actually you are deeply suffering and very stressed and you don't have people to decompress. It's why women's life expectancy are higher
Yeah.
because they actually don't hold this stuff in. They actually have people to talk about it. So
Right.
that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah. That's awesome. As a Christian, I know what it means to have a friendship with Jesus, but for somebody that listening that think that just sounds weird, how is that possible? What does that mean to you to have a friendship with Jesus? Because it's a real thing. It's a
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah. It's it's a term people struggle with
Yeah.
uh, for a couple of reasons. I list 3 reasons in the book. But first, it's because like a friendship with Jesus just sounds like something you do for your children, right?
Right.
Like if you want to bring your kids to school, like or to Bible school or to Sunday school, you want them to learn about what it's like to be with Jesus. It's like, oh, he's your best friend. He's always there to hang out with you, and that works great for
Right.
them.
Yeah.
But almost when you mature as an adult, it's all about what you do for Jesus. He's your
Right.
master. He's your Lord. You're not hanging out with him like he's your bestie. So there's kind of a maturation issue there.
Hmm.
Second, I think we have difficulty being friends with Jesus because he's God, right?
Right.
Like he's so much more divine than me.
Yeah.
How can I call him someone so close? Because I know I'm sinful. I can't let him get this close. Like he's just, so we're just so locked in solely into the divinity of Jesus. So we can't possibly imagine him as someone who, like, we just don't like using the term a friend. It seems shallow,
Yeah.
right? But then thirdly, that's ultimately because of our previous experience with friendships. If we're applying like most of our earthly experience with of friendships to God, at
Right.
best, he is a great friend who can shoot the breeze with us over coffee. But at its worst, it's someone who told us that they loved us and stabbed us in the back and ruined our
Right.
lives. So
Yeah.
why would we want to use that same term? The same reason
Right.
for why people have struggles with calling him our father. Um, but the reason why this is so important is because God, like Jesus is still our Lord. He is still our Savior. He's still our Rabbi. He's still all of these vertical titles, right? But by calling him a friend of ours, that he is a friend king, he is a
Hmm.
friend teacher, he is a friend God or God
Right.
friend, you could say. Um, that just shows how extensively close he wants to be. Friendship is the only relationship we have that is solely bound by grace. There
Yeah.
is nothing that binds you and your friends other than I just want to be in this friendship with you for who you are and what I can do for you and what you can do for me. There's no legal contract that binds you, like an employee
Right.
contract. There's no legal contract like, a marriage certificate. It's very hard to exit out of those, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard. Like you are always biologically wired to your family, whether you want to be or not. Um, you have an obligation to those relationships, but friendship, it's a
Yeah.
choice. It's a For someone to befriend you is a solely act of grace. So when you think about the grace
Sure.
of relationship with God, I think it's best summed up as a friendship for that reason.
Absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree with all that. This is a subject that has come up recently. Um, as a pastor, I mean, I don't know how your church runs, but when new people come into our church, we want to be welcoming and we want them to feel loved and, known and stuff. But at a certain point, it can't be all the church's responsibility to fulfill every need that, someone walking through the door has when they're feeling lonely. What would you say to somebody that's wants to go to church, but church has a bad rap for them, or they've been to a church and they felt like nobody paid attention? Where's the line? You know what I mean? Like it is the church's responsibility to love on people that walk in the door, but we can't do it forever. At some point, somebody's got to take responsibility to
Yeah,
pursue. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
for
As a
sure.
pastor, what do you think about that? Like, what is the best way for somebody to pursue those relationships when they feel like it's the church's responsibility to?
Yeah. To
That was a
always.
long way to say that question. Sorry.
It's so tricky because that's the balance, right? So
There
like I'm
is. There's got to be
thinking
a
about
balance
how we're gonna
somewhere.
do it. We minister in a college town. So right now things are really dead over the summer. But like
Yeah.
for us, our Easter and Christmas equivalent
Yes.
is the first Sunday of the fall semester. We skyrocket on
Wow. Yeah.
Sunday. So we're gonna have like 100 new guests on that first Sunday of the semester.
Yeah.
So and we have to be abundantly clear of like, if you're here to check this out, here is our steps of how you can find community. So if you're searching for a church, like community should hopefully be a piece of that. That's what
Right.
church does so well. It's
Yeah.
You're not just attending a service, you're finding a family, and that requires so much more. So
Yeah.
there's just simply from like the programmatic side of it where people just need to always know what those outlets are.
Mhm.
So how I've really learned it is our job as pastors and leaders in churches is simply to create the environments people need to find their belonging. And
Yeah.
you just constantly communicate what those environments are while always inviting them to take those steps without forcing them to say, like, hey, if you are looking for community to grow in your relationship with Jesus, then you need
Right.
to draw a small group. Well, that's a little presumptive,
Yeah.
right? Because what if this person already has a good group of friends and they just need a church to attend?
Yeah.
Give them that space. You should still have small groups available, but you don't have to feel the pressure to say, I need to get everybody into a group or to make
Right.
a huge claim that says you will grow in your relationship with Jesus when you join a group. Because we've all had those groups that honestly felt kind of flat, or we didn't quite
Mhm.
click with them. That happens all the time.
Right.
So there's that side of it where you need to have those environments because people just never hear you. Like it's going to be the 10th time you talk about it in, a 10-week span that they'll finally realize, oh, you have serving teams I can join for community?
Right.
Why didn't you say so? And we're just
Yeah.
clawing our eyes out because like we did. So there's
Yeah.
that side of it. But then there is kind of that reality where a lot of people just feel like the church has to make every single first move. Or at least they feel entitled to a certain kind of relationship or be like, well, I just want someone to reach out to me,
Yeah.
right? I just want to show up. I want someone to see me. I want the pastor to remember my name immediately when I come in. I
Right.
want I want someone to invite me into a group. And then if they don't, then maybe we're like, oh, they just don't care.
Yeah.
Um, well, if someone has those thoughts about their church, they are probably projecting some other past wounding
Yeah.
either from a church or from a Christian friend or from family onto this, and therefore they're hypercritical because they just expect these people to come to them.
Yeah.
Um, so there needs to be one of the things I always tell people, like, and this sounds ridiculously simple, but if you want to grow in your friendships, especially in your church, you might have to be the one to take the first step
Yeah.
because everybody else wants to be invited into the next thing too.
Right.
Everyone wants to have someone to check out, or to reach in. What am I saying? To reach out to them and check in. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. To reach out and check in. Everyone wants to be invited to a group. Everyone
Sure.
wants to invite, but sometimes you need to be the one to
Yeah.
take that step and actually initiate the conversation, to get to show up a little early and stay a little late. Whoa, life changing, like,
Yeah.
and actually try to build some of these relationships and then ask them out to coffee to get to know them on a deeper level, right?
Yeah. That's good. That's all of that was very good. We talked about vulnerability a little bit in the beginning. Why do you think it's so important? And how can somebody, they want to go deeper in their relationships? What is a way that they can become more vulnerable with the
Mhm.
close friends that they have?
Yeah. Well, first, for all y'all who are like, I don't need to share about the crap in my life, to grow closer to friendships and to feel better. That's just not what the science tells us. So for me to
Yeah.
convince you, like the side effects of loneliness are very similar to the side effects of keeping all of the hard stuff in and not
Yeah.
confessing. In fact, a lot of those feelings ultimately come out as shame.
Mhm.
Our fear of confessing and being vulnerable is ultimately driven by shame. So I don't know if y'all have ever read Brene Brown or know of her work.
Yes.
Fantastic, right?
Yep.
But she says, like, if you are experiencing levels of shame because you don't want to talk about this hard stuff, you're going to be more anxious, you're going to be more depressed, you're going to feel more irritable and angry and more lonely, right?
Right.
Because no one's going to trust me, no one's going to love me. Like, I'm afraid to share this because I'm going to be rejected. Those are all the exact same things that ties with the side effects of loneliness. They absolutely go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So then imagine what happens if, say, you do have a friend where you can finally confess that thing you have never talked about to anyone besides your counselor who is paid to be your friend. Let's be honest.
Right.
Listen, no counselor can do the work that a
Right.
friend who wants to be there and love you anyway with no other payment attached to it.
Right.
Like no counselor can meet that kind of need. Counseling's still great, but to have that friend to still love you anyway, like you're gonna be
Sure.
so seen. You're gonna feel so loved. Like just imagine yourself in that situation. If you're doubting what vulnerability can do for you, you actually have a friend who listens and loves you anyway, gives you a big hug and helps you.
Yeah.
How is that not better? But then the question
Exactly.
is, how do I know? Right?
Yeah.
How do I know they'll do that? You don't. There is always the risk that they will stab you in the back and that they won't
Yeah.
respond well, right? But there's also the very good chance that they will listen. You know,
Mhm.
covering ourselves is actually not the brave thing to do. It's sharing ourselves is the brave thing to do. That's
Absolutely.
greatly. So, yeah, and at the end of the day, like if you don't feel like you have one of those people in your life, it's a gradual thing. So I'm not saying, go befriend someone, but during the greeting 2 minutes at your church and be like, hey, let's go grab coffee, and then you share your entire life story with them.
Right.
Uh, that not normally happens.
Yeah.
But it takes time for you to see like, okay, like how much can I share with this person and just slowly start to get a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um, and here's what I found in my studies, like when a part of my dissertation required the 30 young adults who participated in my study to spend 4 weeks in what was called spiritual direction groups. Essentially, it was a small group structure where they went around in a circle. They each had 10 minutes to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about, and then 10 minutes to just respond to questions by their group.
Yeah.
Nothing was off limits. And what they reported was how quickly friendships formed because of just simply 4 weeks of having scheduled time to talk about the hard stuff that they were going through, or just to be honest about whatever they needed to talk about. Um, it expedited the formation of those friendships and the trust
Yeah.
with those friendships, all because they were willing to be vulnerable. Um, and at the end of the day, like that's the antidote, or yeah, that's the antidote to our loneliness. That's the solution. Is
Sure.
how much of ourselves are we willing to share? So,
Yeah. It's so important. It's important and it's so worth it. It's scary, but it's so
yeah,
worth it. Yeah. So, what do you hope people gain from reading your book? What do you hope they feel when they walk away from reading your book?
a number of things.
Yeah.
A number of things. One, I want it to be a wake-up call
Mhm.
because this shift into our loneliness epidemic has been happening over the last 2 to 3 decades. And it's really been since the adoption of the smartphone at,
Yeah.
wide scale that we are now realizing, oh my gosh, I can't look people in the eye. I don't want to talk to people. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to strangers anymore. COVID did a number on it. Like, just for it to be a realization that, loneliness epidemics isn't like a COVID outbreak where you breathe in the air and you just get lonely. Like,
Yeah.
this is a social contagion that's in our culture that breeds a lifestyle that we are opting into, whether we realize it
Mhm.
or not, to live more isolated. So just to realize all those forces that are going on and just the crazy effects of loneliness. But then second, I want people to realize truly the amazing science behind significant friendship and community and how beneficial it is for your life. Everything about your life increases if the quality of your friendships increase, and we
Sure.
prioritize that, right?
Yeah.
So to see that, and then thirdly, yeah, it is to discover the power of confession and vulnerability. I think chapter 9 of my book is my favorite that I wrote.
Yeah.
It's near and dear to me just because that's a startling effect, and yeah, the vulnerability brings to our life. So find those people that you can be quote unquote naked and unashamed with.
Right.
So
Right. Well, I loved this book. Like I said, this is kind of a subject that has come up repeatedly in our church and then even just in relationships that we have around here. So I think it's super important. I can't imagine life without my friends. I can't imagine life without my Christian friends, people that I know are going to pray for me when I ask them to pray for me and they're going to tell me the truth. But I think it's so important for everybody to have these friendships. So I thank you for being a guest and for sharing all this with me. This is great.
well,
So,
thank you for the
yes,
opportunity and for reading it too. Most people like
absolutely.
maybe skim through a couple chapters, but for you to read the whole thing, that means the world. Seriously.
Well, I'm honored to do it. Thank you, Jake.
Awesome.
Bye.